I'm Dean Foley, a proud Camillery man, and this is the Indigipreneur podcast. So Josephine, to start things off, could you please share a bit about your background and what led you down the path of entrepreneurship and starting your own business?
Well, it's probably a bit of madness. When I say madness, you need to actually look at things and want change. I mean, I'm more of a social entrepreneur than a straight entrepreneur in a sense, and I really love the idea of the private sector models coming in, or capital coming in, to really actually have proper risk analysis and project management around solving social problems, particularly in infrastructure and other areas. Well, I suppose I was a criminal lawyer for 10 years, both a prosecutor and a defender in New South Wales jurisdiction and in the NT. My last stint was in Arnhem Land. And particularly when I was in remote, I was at Groote Island, Bakamba, Gallywinkel, Gapawuyak, Nhulunbuy, you see our mob, particularly in remote, and they're not, like, I've worked in the city with crooks, right? They're not criminalised. They are very well versed in a very ancient and complicated, sophisticated culture, but operating in the Western democracy and capital system, none of them were. Well, there are some groups who are really doing it well, but in terms of my lens from the criminal justice system, I thought, mate, there's got to be something better than this. I mean, what was really striking was that people aren't given a fair go in remote and rural because they don't have the right enabling environment. So, for example, only 50% of the 72 small communities that's the phone. Anyway, we'll just keep on going. In Northern Territory have proper sewage, water, police service, telecommunications, and yet there's money spent that's not directly going to them. So really, to cut it long thing short, I think I got into entrepreneurialism or social entrepreneurialism because I want to see something better. Now, the tipping point for me was being up in Arnhem Land for 2.5 years, and I came back down south and I wanted to do something different because I loved practicing, and I was in court every day, but I felt that I wasn't getting the results I needed. Not I needed, but the individuals. And I went to the US and met a lot of really successful native tribes. And they have a conference I went to where there's $1 billion table, and I was invited. And even though all these guys are competitors in some respects in terms of government contracting, or even some of them in mining, in all sorts of tourism, they all got on together because business is the great equaliser. You've got a spreadsheet, you can trade with each other. And I just thought, wow, this is the way to go. Sick of the merry-go-round of governments and bureaucracy and even social services. And there's a lot of good people in those places. It's just, I think this is the time for Aboriginal people, Torres Strait Islanders, to grab business with both hands. And it's a great opportunity for people to be totally independent.
Yeah, it's a perfect time to get into entrepreneurship and help out yourself and communities.
But it's not an easy road. You got to you got to strap yourself in, and it's sink or swim. It's not easy. When people are successful, people will turn around and say, "Oh, how do you do that? Who do you know?" It is not easy, and if you get to the top too quickly, you won't be prepared and you'll fall. And people will understand that you don't have the experience behind you. Real entrepreneurialism is starting from the bottom, is putting in a lot of risk, and that could be in your own time, your own money. It's probably like athletes have to prepare themselves. It's exciting, it's great, and you need to have a bit of craziness to think of those amazing things that could happen if you're independent and you earning good money and the financial freedom you can have and what you can do for that for your family. But the reality is you have to work very hard. And unfortunately in Australia we do not have an entrepreneur culture. Like totally no. I think a lot of people are trying to get that way. I mean, I'll give you an example. Actually today, I set up a teleconference with, quite an important department. They have no video chat capability on their video. I mean, maybe I'm going on a tangent, but we talk about being innovative and agile, but our government, who talks about it all the time, hasn't even got the facilities to use modern technology a lot of the time. The other thing that you'll note is that when you become successful, that people might not be happy for you because they're not actually doing well. And I think Australia has a terrible culture in that respect where we like to some people, and I think it's generally the case because I've seen the difference in the States, don't like to see people doing well or think, oh, who do you think you are, getting bigger than your boots? And that's something all of us have to work hard on, supporting young people and bringing up the next generation of leadership, even leadership with their own families. But so entrepreneurialism is not soft and fluffy. It's actually hard work, but the rewards are great, but the risks are also great too.
Yeah, definitely. And tell us a bit more about your actual business and so how did you get the idea or concept and how's it all progressing so far?
I've got a number of businesses. I've done a lot of consultancy just to keep my other businesses alive. It's hard work. I've got other directors in my company. I see us as a big family and it's been great, but I'm the youngest and I run everything. But everybody plays their part. So when you're, and I was talking to you earlier, when you're in those types of positions where you have to sort of manage the company because it's its own legal identity, you have to be so willing to learn, and you have to be able to work well with people, but also examine and be open to looking at where you have to improve. That's where I suppose I don't think anyone has been really successful from new money without going through really hard times, because it's sort of like part of the formula for an entrepreneur is to be at a point where you're down and out and come back up. Because to be an effective business person, you actually need to master, the main thing is communication. Sorry, I didn't answer your question, but that's what a good...
we answered another question about...
business person on politician, that gamma.
Yeah, you actually went ahead and answered the question about, what's the difference between entrepreneurship and employee. So I think you answered that really well.
Yeah.
And you probably answered this one too.
But I can talk about my foundation quickly. We've set up a foundation which will sit alongside some private sector investment, and that's really exciting. We're doing some great work there called the Big River Impact Foundation. So we've got 10 plus tier 1 corporate partners in our group, and we're very excited. The foundation is doing some absolutely great work, so I'll be keen to talk to you about that on another occasion.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Definitely keen to talk more about that.
Yeah.
And what have you learned from running a business, and what are the key fundamentals to make it successful?
Hard work, and constant improvement. I think it's hard work, but it's working smart. It's also determination. Like if you're determined, no one can stop you. You have to have, and, you know, I've had a few visions and they've just come to me where I want to be. So I think it's actually following your intuition. I love listening to people like Oprah, and she said everybody in life's got a life force. So you've got to follow that, and you've got to also know when to quit. So it's resilience. It's also, I think, number one quality is communication, because if you're in a startup particularly, people have to buy into the idea. They have to see the clear business case. And if you can't articulate that, so I'd say when you're in the startup phase, you can test things with potential customers or partners, but you actually have to logically, it's no good just having an idea and not doing the research. A few young people have said to me, I want to do this app, I want to do that. And I say, well, what's in the market now? Oh, I haven't looked. Well, that's just an idea. It's not even startup. That's not even angels when you've got an idea. You have to do your research. And, like, you don't need to, I know you're doing an MBA and I think that's fantastic, but you don't need to do an MBA. A lot of it you can learn, but you need to, and you don't need to read heaps of books. There's lots of talks on YouTube if you don't like reading. There's ebooks. There's this great one I'm reading at the moment. But because we're beyond the information age now, but that information used to only be available to the rich and the well-to-do and the people who have influence. It's available to everybody now. So you've got to do your research. If you've got a product or a service, you actually have to see if there's already a market established. What's your unique offering? Are you undercutting people on price because of your delivery structure? You have to work it all out. And then you can go. And then that's the fundamentals. But it's bloody hard work.
And for you, as an Indigenous entrepreneur, what's the biggest challenge you faced and how have you overcome it?
Well, I think also because I'm a female, some people, they don't know how to take. I think the business community's coming a long way with female, but it's also breaking down barriers and I suppose acting swiftly when there's any unconscious bias around, which I have done. One time it really worked out and the person will always be very close to me, and I had a tough conversation. In meetings he was saying, things like, you can get us the coffee. And I'm like, no, I will not. I'm not the tea lady. I'm the boss. And just, saying, well, the only real Aborigines are remote. But that guy had never met an Aboriginal person in his life. And I had a tough conversation with him. And he read all these books. And he actually had a bit of a breakdown. But it was great, even though he had a breakdown. Like sometimes breakdowns aren't a bad thing as long as they're not serious. And he learnt, one of my most loyal friends now. Another one, older guy, wanted to take over everything. Had those conversations. You have to have conversations early and swift in a very respectful way. And it got to the point where I had to say to him, no more mission managers here, mate, out the door. So I think it's like, don't let, just because you may not be on top of every single aspect of your business and you have to outsource particular things, if you're the managing director, you're the managing director or you're the CEO. You can get in experts to explain to you different aspects, but don't let people take over because you don't think you can do it. Learn it. Because if you're in any industry now, you have to be on top of multiple expertise like the internet, even just simple things like, social media, to more complicated, product design and manufacturing issues. But you never let anybody take over from you, your power. But power's not taken, it's always given away. So it's really important the way you react. So that's why communication is important and being able to have critical and crucial conversations. That's a good book to get. Crucial Conversations, amazing. Crucial conversations early and in a respectful manner. Learn that technique, you'll be right, and practice.
So what advice would you give an aspiring Indigenous entrepreneur who's uncertain about what they should do to get into business and get it up and running?
Do your research and lead with your best skill set. Find an industry where your best skill set lies. If you're a great writer, look into that. If you're good at this or that, you've got to critically evaluate your own skill set and work out what sort of industry you can operate in. If you don't have what you're passionate about too, but don't just think of an idea and think, I'm going to do an app. Like, there must be a billion, I'm sure there's hundreds of millions of apps now. Apps. I hear people talking about apps all the time. I'm sick of hearing about it. Do your research and test your market. So if you're not sure, you do your research, then you might contact 10 of your potential clients. And in business, they say it's part of Asian culture, but it's no, Australian culture. Everybody's so interconnected in Australian business culture. You've got to watch your reputation too. If you say you're going to do something, do it and do it on time, or renegotiate, offer an acceptance. Don't do anything half-assed, but it'll come back and you'll get that reputation in the market. So it's you've got to do your research, you've got to be honourable, on time, and just be resilient. But have, backup plans as well.
Yeah. And what's the biggest change you've noticed in the Indigenous business sector, and where do you see it progressing in the future?
Well, I think it's an Indigenous procurement policy. I formerly was on a retainer with NANA, which is a big corporation from Alaska, to lobby for that change in the procurement policy. I think that's happening well, but I'd like to see the procurement policy develop more so that there is Indigenous employment attached to it. I feel that in the market there's a lot of disquiet about, white labelling. I don't hold that against anybody from doing that, but certainly in government contracts, there should be a return in employment, so it's fair to the non-Indigenous businesses who have to go through the normal tender process. But seriously, Aboriginal people weren't at all in the tender process, so it's fair enough that's happening. I also think that we have to look also to make sure that we get proper advice before you do joint ventures, or you're partnering with someone, because once that's set up, it's really hard to get out of. So I'd like to see the development of some codes of practice around the industry, like the construction industry, mining, etc., so that the more powerful party has to pay for the other side's lawyers to make sure that the contract's fair, because it's a little bit of unconscionability. Yeah.
Yeah, massively, and that's what I've noticed with the Indigenous procurement policy. Even though they've given 300 million away, I haven't really seen it have a positive effect on a grassroots level.
Yeah, it's still a tiny bit of money compared to 63, whatever it is. Yeah, it's a tiny bit of money. But I think we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves either. Yeah,
it's just early stages, and
okay.
Is there one or three business apps or tools that have added tremendous value to your business?
Well, I like Xero, which is the good. Xero. I like Basecamp, which is fantastic for organising all your documents and doing project plans. Probably those two. I love Google Hangouts. I have the Google Suite. I love Google, by the way.
Google's amazing. And can you recommend one or three helpful books for Indigenous entrepreneurs?
How to Win Friends and Influence People, Crucial Conversations, and I'm just getting one up now. I like Tribal Leadership as well, which is a book on how to harness your teams.
Sounds awesome. I definitely have to check those books out, Josephine.
Okay.
Thanks again for your valuable time. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dean.
This was the Indigipreneur Podcast, an Indigenous entrepreneurship and economic development podcast which aims to promote positive change within Indigenous communities.